Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. No, my voice. Why does it sound like a girl's? The words that would end my life as I knew it were spoken in a room so cold and sterile it felt like a morgue. 3 people were present: myself, Dr. Morrow, and a nurse whose name tag read Claire. Morrow was the agency's top biomedical expert, a man with a clinical detachment that could make a death sentence sound like a weather report. Claire, on the other hand, had eyes the color of a calm sea, but a sharpness in them that told me she missed nothing. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. That shattering moment came later. The story, the end of Evan Ward and the beginning of someone else started here, in this windowless room under fluorescent lights that hummed with a flat, indifferent buzz. I was 28 years old, a digital ghost. My name was Evan Ward, and my job was to slip through firewalls, crack encrypted servers, and pull secrets from the deepest, darkest corners of the web. I was good at it. I was so good. In fact, that I'd been chosen for a mission deemed impossible to infiltrate the inner circle of an organization known as Helix. Helix is a fortress. Evan, Dr. Morrow began, his voice devoid of any warmth. He gestured to a large screen on the wall, which displayed a complex organizational chart. At the top sat one man, Marcus Reeves, but every single position directly beneath him, every head of operations, finance, and security was held by a woman. It's more than a company policy. It's a cult of personality built around a deep-seated paranoia. Reeves trusts no men in positions of power. Our assets have been burned. Our surveillance is useless. We cannot get inside. I nodded, my mind already racing through the technical possibilities. So you need me to find a digital backdoor, a vulnerability in their network architecture. No, Morrow said flatly. We've tried. Their system is airtight. The only way to access the data we need is from a terminal within their central command, and the only people allowed in that room are his senior female staff. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I didn't like where this was going. So you're scrubbing the mission. It was Claire who answered, her voice gentle but firm, a stark contrast to Morrow's metallic tone. Not scrubbing. Evan, we're moving to Contingency C. I'd heard whispers of Contingency C. It was a theoretical, radical protocol, something agents joked about over beers but never believed was real. It was the agency's nuclear option for deep cover infiltration. Morrow tapped a remote, and the screen shifted to a series of disturbing biomedical diagrams. Full-spectrum appearance alteration. He said, we've perfected the process. It includes minor rhinoplasty and facial restructuring, liposuction and strategic fat redistribution to alter your silhouette, and a carefully monitored regimen of hormonal therapy. The room spun. He wasn't just talking about a disguise. He wasn't talking about a wig and some makeup. He was talking about turning me, Evan Ward, into a woman. You're insane, I finally managed to say. My voice a low growl. Absolutely not, I won't do it. My body, my identity. It's not a costume you can just put on and take off. I looked at my hands, at the calloused fingers and the sprinkling of dark hair on my knuckles. This was me. How could they ask me to give this up? The fear was primal, a gut-wrenching terror of losing the very foundation of who I was. Dr. Morrow sighed, clearly annoyed by my emotional outburst. He was a man of science, not sentiment. Your objections are noted, Agent Ward, but the mission's priority is absolute. I stood up, ready to walk out, ready to hand in my resignation if I had to. But then Claire stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Her touch was surprisingly grounding. Evan, she said softly, her blue eyes meeting mine. There was no judgment in them, only a profound understanding that unnerved me. I know what this sounds like. It's terrifying, but Dr. Morrow is only giving you the clinical breakdown. He's not telling you what it's really like. She led me to a chair and sat opposite me, her posture open and reassuring. The process is gradual, she began, her voice a quiet murmur that cut through the humming lights. The hormone treatments start first, slowly, in the first week. You'll just feel a little more tired than usual. By week 2, you'll notice your skin starting to feel softer. Your sense of smell might heighten. The emotional shifts are subtle at first. 2, you might find yourself more attuned to the mood in a room, more receptive. She described every phase with a calm, methodical tenderness. She talked about the surgeries, framing them not as a violation but as a sculpting process. She explained how the fat would be taken from my abdomen and carefully grafted to my hips and chest to create gentle, natural curves. She spoke of the facial procedure as if it were simply refining a masterpiece, softening my jawline, raising my cheekbones slightly. Every word she spoke painted a picture that was both horrifying and strangely compelling. I felt the last vestiges of my resistance starting to crumble, worn away by the soothing cadence of her voice and the undeniable sincerity in her eyes. I was still terrified, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of something else, a morbid curiosity. What would it be like? Sensing my hesitation, Claire leaned in closer, her hand moving from my arm to my shoulder. Her touch was warm, a small point of heat in the frozen landscape of my fear. She lowered her voice to a near whisper, a secret shared only between us. "You won't be alone," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I will be there, every step of the way, from the first injection to the last stitch. When you wake up, I'll be the first person you see. I promise." That promise was the final blow to my defenses. The idea of going through this crucible was unbearable, but the thought of going through it alone was impossible. In her, I saw a guide, a lifeline. My rational mind screamed at me to run, to preserve the man I was. But my instincts, battered and terrored, clung to the anchor she was offering. I took a deep breath, the sterile air burning my lungs. I looked from her earnest face to Morrow's impatient one. The mission, my duty, my country, it all faded into the background. All that remained was the precipice and the calm voice telling me it was okay to jump. I gave a single, slow nod. The decision was made. It was a silent surrender that sealed my fate, burying Evan Ward long before the first scalpel ever touched his skin. The transition from consciousness to oblivion was a gentle slide, orchestrated by the steady drip of an IV and the soft, reassuring murmur of Claire's voice in my ear. I remember the blinding white of the surgical lights, a constellation of artificial suns staring down at me. I remember the crisp, cold smell of antiseptic and the faint, rhythmic beeping of monitors that sounded like a countdown to the end of my world. And I remember the last thing I felt, the warmth of Claire's hand closing around mine, a silent promise being kept. The days that followed were a blur, a foggy dreamscape punctuated by brief moments of semi-lucid awareness. I was adrift in a sea of medication, my body a vessel undergoing a radical unseen metamorphosis. There were no sharp pains, only a collection of strange new sensations that my drugged mind struggled to process. I felt a persistent dull ache in my chest, a tender throb that wasn't exactly painful but was impossible to ignore. It was a feeling of expansion, as if something was growing, pushing outward from within. My hips felt heavier, weighted down, and when the nurses would shift me in the bed, the pressure there felt different, more pronounced. My skin became a battleground of sensitivity. The cool fabric of the hospital sheets, once a comfort, now felt almost abrasive, a constant source of low-level irritation against my newly sensitized nerves. I'd break out in sweats, a clammy sheen covering my body, and I would vaguely register Claire's presence. She would be there, wiping my brow with a cool cloth, her touch feather-light and infinitely gentle. She would check my vitals, her fingers on my wrist, her movements efficient and calm. She would adjust my blanket, ensuring I was covered, her quiet competence a constant source of security in my hazy world. These moments were my only anchors. In the swirling confusion, the phantom pressures and the strange aches, the warmth of her hand and the soft scent of her lavender-scented soap were the only things that felt real. Full consciousness returned not like a switch being flipped, but like a slow sunrise after a long, dark night. It took 2 weeks. The first thing I became truly aware of was the sound of my own breathing. The second was the sound of my own voice. I tried to clear my throat, a dry, raspy effort to speak. Water. I croaked. The sound that emerged from my lips sent a jolt of pure shock through my system. It was wrong. It was thin, higher-pitched, lacking the familiar bass rumble I had known for my entire adult life. It was smooth where mine had been rough. It was the voice of a stranger. I tried again, pushing the sound out with more force. No, my voice. Why does it sound like a girl's? The words hung in the quiet room, a testament to the irreversible change that had occurred. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I struggled to sit up, my movements clumsy and weak. Claire was there in an instant, her hands on my shoulders, gently easing me back against the pillows. "Easy," she said. Her voice had the same calm melody I remembered from the fog. "It's okay. Your vocal cords were slightly altered during the procedures. It's part of the change. You're okay." "Okay," I repeated, the alien sound of my own voice making me flinch. "Nothing about this is okay." She didn't argue. She simply let me breathe, her hand resting on my arm until the initial wave of panic subsided. Then she picked up a small silver-backed hand mirror from the bedside table. "I think you should see," she said softly, her expression unreadable. "It's time." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread. I didn't want to see. I was terrified of the face that would look back at me, but I knew I couldn't hide from it forever. With a trembling hand, I reached out and took the mirror. I lifted it slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The face in the reflection was not my own. It was familiar, in a haunting, uncanny way. The eyes were still mine, the same shape, the same shade of hazel, but everything around them was different. My jawline, once sharp and angular, was now soft and gracefully curved. My nose, which had a slight bump on the bridge from a high school football injury, was now perfectly straight and slender. My lips appeared fuller, the skin of my cheeks was smooth and clear, and there was a new delicacy to the overall structure of my face that was undeniably feminine. My gaze drifted downward. I pulled at the collar of my hospital gown. Beneath the fabric, I could see the source of the persistent ache in my chest. Two small, soft mounds had formed, sensitive and new. They were subtle, but they were unquestionably breasts. I was a stranger in my own skin. The face in the mirror belonged to a pretty, delicate young woman who looked tired and frightened. Evan Ward was gone. He had been erased, sanded down, and reshaped into this creature. A wave of despair washed over me, so profound it left me breathless. This was real. This was permanent. Claire moved to stand behind me, her reflection appearing next to mine in the mirror. She placed her hands gently on my trembling shoulders. Her eyes met mine in our shared reflection. Her expression was full of a sad, gentle empathy. She leaned in, her warm breath ghosting against my ear. "From today on," she whispered, her voice both a declaration and a comfort, "we're going to call you Emma." My new life, my new identity, began in a secluded training facility that felt more like a luxury rehabilitation center than a spy school. Evan Ward was officially dead, at least on paper. A classified file was closed, a career was ended, and a ghost was born. In his place was Emma Taylor, a blank slate, a person who existed only in a freshly printed file and in the frightened eyes staring back at me from the mirror each morning. The training was comprehensive and relentless. I wasn't just learning a role, I was being rebuilt from the ground up. My instructors, a team of stern but brilliant women, told me that I was being born again, and they were my new parents, teaching me how to exist in the world. My first lessons were in movement. As a man, I walked with a purpose, my center of gravity in my chest, my arms swinging in tight, efficient arcs, all wrong. My movement coach, a former ballerina named Lena, would say, tapping her cane against the floor, "Emma is not a soldier. She is a woman. Your energy comes from your hips, not your shoulders." Hours were spent walking back and forth across a polished studio floor, learning to shift my balance, to let my hips sway in a natural, subtle rhythm. I had to unlearn a lifetime of habits. I was taught to let my arms be soft, to let my hands rest gracefully, to avoid clenching my fists when I was nervous. We worked on sitting, on standing, on crossing my legs. Every posture had to be deconstructed and relearned until it was second nature. The vocal coaching was just as intense. My new, higher-pitched voice had to be tamed. It wasn't enough that it sounded female. It had to sound like Emma's voice. I spent hours practicing pitch modulation, learning the softer inflections and the more melodic cadence of female speech patterns. I learned to laugh not from my belly, but from my chest, a lighter, warmer sound. Every grunt, every sigh, every cough was policed and corrected. But the most jarring, the most intensely personal part of the training came from Claire. It was her job to guide me through the daily rituals of being a woman, a world of fabrics, textures, and layers I had never known. Each morning was a new lesson in a foreign language my body was forced to learn. "We start with the foundations," Emma, she'd say, her voice always patient, as she laid out the day's garments on the bed. The first time she handed me a bralette, I just stared at it. It was a simple thing of soft, gray cotton, unpadded and wireless, but it felt like a bomb in my hands. "This goes on my chest?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It does," she said, her expression gentle. "It will help with the sensitivity, and it will give you a smooth line under your clothes. You'll get used to it." Getting used to it was an understatement. The feeling of the soft, elastic band around my ribs, the cups enclosing my small, tender breasts, it was a constant, distracting presence. It wasn't painful, but it was a perpetual reminder of my altered body. It was a strange mix of discomfort and a bizarre, secret security. Next came what she called shaping garments. Not a full-blown corset, but a pair of high-waisted shaping briefs that rose to just under my new bust line. "This will help define your waist," she explained, her fingers expertly smoothing the fabric over my hips, "and it will encourage you to maintain your posture." The compression was snug, a firm hug around my midsection that forced my back to straighten and my hips to tilt slightly. The effect was immediate. When I walked, my new gait felt less conscious, more natural. The garment was doing half the work for me, forcing my body into a more feminine silhouette. Each piece of clothing was a new layer of the performance, a new piece of the puzzle that was Emma. Finally, she would bring out the day's outfit: a simple pencil skirt, a silk blouse, a pair of low, 2-inch heels. The first time I tried to walk in heels, I nearly broke my ankle. But Claire was there, holding my arm, teaching me to walk from heel to toe, to take smaller steps, to find my balance. I would stand before the full-length mirror, my face flushed with a mixture of shame and bewildered fascination. The process of getting dressed was an intimate, almost clinical ritual. Claire would adjust a collar, tuck in a blouse, smooth a wrinkle on my skirt. Her proximity, her hands on my body, was a constant. I could smell the clean, floral scent of her shampoo and feel the warmth of her breath as she leaned in to fasten a necklace around my neck. The makeup sessions were the most intense. She would have me sit on a stool in front of a brightly lit vanity mirror. She would stand behind me, her body pressed lightly against my back as she worked. "Tilt your head up slightly," she'd murmur, one hand gently holding my chin while the other applied a soft layer of foundation. Her touch was delicate, precise, the feeling of a soft brush dusting powder across my cheeks. The cool slick of a mascara wand against my eyelashes, it was an invasion of my personal space that was, simultaneously, profoundly intimate. One afternoon, as she was applying a soft, rose-colored lipstick, her focus was absolute. Her face was just inches from mine in the mirror. I could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, the concentration in the slight purse of her lips. A stray strand of her blonde hair fell forward and brushed against my temple. My heart did a ridiculous, stuttering leap in my chest. This feeling, this confusing, chaotic flutter was becoming more and more frequent around her. It was a dizzying mix of my dependence on her, my gratitude, and this new strange vulnerability that being Emma had unlocked within me. After a month of this relentless, all-consuming training, the transformation was staggering. I stood before the mirror one evening after our sessions were done. A young woman looked back at me. She was slender and graceful, with soft, shoulder-length brown hair that had been expertly styled. Her figure, shaped by hormones and tailored clothing, was feminine and subtle. Her movements were fluid, her posture poised. When I looked into her eyes, I saw the fear and confusion still lurking there, but it was buried deep. On the surface, she was calm, she was believable, she was Emma Taylor. That night, my mission director gave me the final briefing. The target was no longer the nebulous Helix, but a specific entity, Arcane Systems, a tech firm in Seattle that was a known front for Marcus Reeves. My objective: infiltrate the company as a newly hired data analyst, gain access to their internal network, and find the encrypted ledger that detailed all of Reeves's illegal information transfers. My training was over. It was time for Emma Taylor to step into the real world. The final days at the training facility were charged with a strange, nervous energy. My existence had been confined to this sterile bubble, a safe space where every mistake was a learning opportunity and Claire was a constant presence. The thought of leaving it, of stepping out into the world as Emma without my safety net, was terrifying. My dependence on Claire had deepened into something I couldn't quite name. It was more than just the gratitude of a student for their teacher. She was the architect of my new identity, the only person who had seen the terrified man beneath the carefully constructed woman. She was my confessor, my coach, my anchor. The nights grew longer, and our conversations strayed from training protocols to more personal territory. We'd sit in the common area, long after the other instructors had gone, the quiet hum of the building a comforting sound around us. "What happens when men notice me?" I asked one night, the question I'd been dreading. At the office or at a bar, what do I do? Claire looked at me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Some men will flirt. Emma, it's inevitable. The key is to be polite but firm. A smile, a simple thank you, but I'm not interested, is usually enough. You project confidence, not arrogance. You are in control." She would take my hand, her thumb tracing small circles on my palm, and walk me through scenarios. How to deflect a persistent suitor, how to accept a drink without creating an obligation, how to navigate the subtle dance of workplace politics as a woman. Each piece of advice was practical, but delivered with a warmth that felt deeply personal. Every time her skin touched mine, my pulse would quicken, a silent, frantic beat that I was sure she must be able to feel. I didn't understand it. Was this Emma's reaction or was it Evan? Clinging to the only source of kindness in his new, terrifying reality, the lines were so blurred now, I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The night before I was scheduled to leave, a restless anxiety kept me from sleeping. I found myself on the rooftop terrace, a small, manicured space overlooking the dark, sleeping hills. The night air was cool, and it felt good against my flushed skin. A few moments later, the door swished open and Claire stepped out, a light cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. She came to stand beside me at the railing, not speaking for a long time. We just watched the stars. "You're ready," she finally said, her voice soft in the quiet night. "I'm terrified," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "What if they see through me? What if I forget to be her?" Claire turned to face me, the faint moonlight catching in her hair. She reached up and tucked a stray strand of my hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering for a moment against my cheek. The simple gesture sent a jolt of warmth through me. "You've done so well, Emma," she whispered, her eyes searching mine. "You are more than just a disguise. You've brought her to life." Something inside me broke then. A month of repressed fear, of confusion, of a strange and powerful affection for this woman who had guided me through the fire. It all came rushing to the surface. It was an impulse, raw and overwhelming. I wasn't Evan, the disciplined agent. I wasn't even Emma, the careful construct. I was just me, this new person caught between two worlds, and she was the only thing that made sense. I leaned in, closing the small space between us, and pressed my lips to hers. The kiss was hesitant at first, soft and uncertain. It was the first time I had kissed anyone as Emma. My lips felt different, fuller. I tasted the faint, sweet flavor of her chapstick. For a heartbeat, she was still, a statue in my arms. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. But then I felt her relax, her hand moving from my cheek to the back of my neck, her fingers tangling gently in my hair. She kissed me back. It wasn't a passionate, desperate kiss. It was tender, searching, filled with all the things we hadn't said to each other in the sterile rooms and hallways below. It was an acknowledgement of the profound intimacy we had shared, of the strange and unbreakable bond that had been forged between the Creator and her creation. We stayed there, under the pale light of the moon, until the first hint of dawn began to soften the eastern sky. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. The next morning, the transition to my new life was swift and professional. I was given a briefcase containing my new identity. Emma Taylor's life was meticulously fabricated, a new passport with her unfamiliar face smiling back at me, a degree from a prestigious university, a flawless work history as a data analyst. I was no longer an agent of a clandestine organization. I was Emma Taylor, the brilliant new hire at Arcane Systems, a woman with a promising career and a quiet, unassuming life. As I was escorted to the car that would take me to the airport, Claire was there to see me off. The professionalism was back, a necessary wall between us in front of the other agents. "Good luck, Emma," she said, her voice even. "Thank you, Claire," I replied, my own voice betraying a hint of the emotion churning inside me, for everything. Our eyes met one last time. In her gaze, I saw the memory of the rooftop, a silent promise that I wasn't entirely alone. Then I got in the car, and the door closed, sealing me into my new life. The mission had begun. Arcane Systems was housed in a sleek glass and steel tower that scraped the perpetually gray Seattle sky. It projected an image of cutting-edge innovation and corporate polish. On my first day, I walked through the revolving doors feeling like an actress stepping onto a stage for the first time. I wore a tailored navy blue sheath dress that Claire had insisted was perfect professional, stylish, but not so flashy as to draw the wrong kind of attention. My 2-inch heels made a quiet, confident clicking sound on the polished marble floor. I held my head high, my posture perfect. Just as Lena had taught me, I was Emma Taylor, and I belonged here. Heads turned as I walked to the reception desk. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on me, a new and unsettling sensation. As Evan, I had cultivated an ability to be forgettable, to blend into the background as Emma. I was visible. It was both a vulnerability and, to my surprise, a source of a strange, intoxicating power. The man I was here for, Marcus Reeves, made his appearance within my first hour. He didn't summon me to his corner office. He simply appeared at my cubicle, leaning against the partition with an easy, predatory grace. He was handsome in a way that was almost cliché: sharp suit, perfect hair, and a smile that was charming on the surface but held a chilling intelligence in the eyes. "Emma Taylor," he said, his voice a smooth baritone. "The new prodigy from Stanford, Marcus Reeves. Welcome to Arcane." He extended a hand. I took it, my grip firm but not aggressive, just as I'd practiced. "Mr. Reeves, it's a pleasure to be here." "Marcus, please," he corrected, his smile widening. He held my hand a fraction of a second too long. "We're not so formal here. I trust you're settling in well." "Everyone has been very welcoming," I said, retrieving my hand and giving him a polite, professional smile. He lingered, his gaze analytical. "You have an interesting accent," he commented. "A little bit of East Coast, a little bit of British almost. Where did you say you grew up?" My heart gave a painful thud. My file stated I was from a generic Chicago suburb. My altered voice had a unique, hard-to-place quality that the agency had decided to use as a feature. Not a bug, it made Emma seem more worldly, more mysterious. "I moved around a lot as a kid," I replied smoothly, the lie feeling practiced on my tongue. My father's work. I suppose I picked up bits and pieces from everywhere. "I see," he said, though his eyes told me he was filing the information away. He then said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You have very interesting eyes, Emma. It's like they're hiding something." I forced a light laugh, the sound practiced and airy. "Just first-day nerves, I imagine." He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Well, if you need anything at all, my door is always open." He gave me one last, lingering look and then walked away, leaving the scent of expensive cologne in his wake. The encounter left me shaken. He was toying with me, planting seeds of doubt, testing my composure. This mission wasn't just about technical infiltration. It was a psychological duel. The strangest thing began to happen as the days turned into weeks. Living as a woman, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, began to feel less like a performance and more like a reality. The initial awkwardness and self-consciousness started to fade, replaced by a surprising sense of comfort. I found that I enjoyed the simple, physical sensations of being Emma. I liked the feeling of my long hair brushing against the back of my neck when a breeze caught it. I liked the subtle, clean scent of the perfume Claire had chosen for me, a fragrance of white tea and ginger. I grew to love the swish and flow of a skirt around my legs as I walked, a freedom of movement I'd never experienced in jeans or trousers. I even started to appreciate the quiet attention I received, the way a barista would smile at me, or a man would hold a door open. These small courtesies, which I had never noticed as Evan, now felt like a pleasant, comforting part of my daily existence. This growing comfort was a new source of anxiety. It felt like a betrayal of the man I used to be. Where was Evan in all of this? Was he still buried deep inside me, watching through Emma's eyes? Or was he fading away, his voice growing fainter with every passing day? I was succeeding in my mission by becoming my cover, and I was terrified that when the mission was over, there would be no one left to come home to. My work as an agent continued in the shadows. I'd stay late under the guise of being a diligent new employee, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I mapped the company's network architecture. I'd engage my female colleagues in friendly lunchtime chatter, carefully prying for information about office layouts and security protocols. One evening, feigning a clumsy spill, I managed to get into Marcus's office with a sympathetic janitor, and while he was fetching paper towels, I inserted a specialized USB drive into his terminal. It was a high-risk move, but the drive was a ghost, designed to copy encrypted files in seconds and leave no trace. Throughout it all, my lifeline was a series of encrypted, untraceable text messages with Claire. They were my only connection to my old life, my only reality check. Mihi's testing me, asking questions about my past. Claire, stick to your cover. You know Emma's life better than your own. You're doing great. Me, I'm scared. Claire, I'm starting to forget what it feels like to be me. Claire, I haven't forgotten. I'm right here. Stay focused. Emma, you're almost there. Her messages, always calm, always reassuring, were the anchor that kept me from drifting away completely. Her voice in my head, reminding me of who I was and why I was here, was the only thing that kept me sane as the lines between Evan and Emma blurred into an indistinguishable, terrifying gray. The invitation arrived via a crisp. Corporate email Arcane Systems was hosting its annual charity gala, a lavish affair for employees and high-profile clients. Attendance for senior staff was mandatory. For me, it was the perfect opportunity. An event like this meant security would be focused on the guests, not the back-end servers. It was my chance to find the ledger. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The dress Claire had selected for me had been delivered by a discreet agency courier. It was a stunning, floor-length gown of black silk that hugged my figure in a way that was both elegant and audacious. It was cut low in the back, and the fabric felt cool and heavy against my skin, with my hair swept up in a sophisticated twist and the subtle, smoky makeup I had painstakingly applied. The woman in the mirror was a complete stranger. She was beautiful, confident, and a little bit dangerous. She was everything I needed to be tonight. The gala was in full swing when I arrived. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and shimmering gowns, the air buzzing with polite conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. Marcus found me almost immediately, his eyes lighting up with an appreciative gleam as they swept over me. "Emma," he said, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips, "you look breathtaking." "You clean up nicely yourself." "Marcus," I replied, my voice a playful purr that felt shockingly natural. He led me to the dance floor. As we moved to the slow melodic music, he pulled me closer than was strictly professional, his hand a warm, firm pressure on the bare skin of my lower back. "You know," he murmured, his lips close to my ear, his breath warm against my neck. "I was right about you. You absolutely have the talent of a woman who knows how to keep secrets." My blood ran cold, but I forced a coy smile. Every woman has her secrets. Marcus? Later, feigning a need for fresh air, I slipped away from the dance floor. My objective was a small private lounge on the mezzanine level that I knew Marcus used for discreet meetings. I overheard snippets of conversation as I passed clusters of guests, but it was from behind the closed door of that VIP room that I heard it Marcus's voice, discussing encrypted payment transfers with two of his clients. He was talking about the ledger. It was the final piece of evidence, the smoking gun that would bring down his entire operation. After he left the room, I knew I had a small window. I managed to slip inside, my heart pounding against my ribs. The room was empty, using a small high-tech device disguised as a lipstick tube. I bypassed the electronic lock on his private laptop. The file was there, hidden under layers of dummy folders, just as the intel had suggested, as the data transferred to my concealed microdrive. I heard footsteps approaching. I finished the transfer with a second to spare, snapping the laptop shut and turning just as the door opened. It was Marcus. His charming smile was gone, replaced by a look of cold suspicion. Looking for something, Emma? Just admiring the view, I said smoothly, gesturing towards the large window overlooking the city. It's quieter up here. He walked slowly into the room, his eyes scanning every detail. From the laptop on the desk to the flush on my cheeks, he began to ask questions. A rapid-fire interrogation disguised as casual conversation. He asked about the specific projects I had supposedly worked on at my previous job, about the professors I'd had at Stanford, about tiny, insignificant details of my fabricated life. It was the ultimate test. My mind raced, pulling up the files I had memorized, the life story of the woman I had become. I answered every question calmly, weaving a believable narrative, embellishing it with small, personal anecdotes. I was performing for my life, and every word had to be perfect. He seemed to accept my answers, but the suspicion never entirely left his eyes. Just as I thought I had passed the test, one of his female security chiefs entered the room. "Marcus," she said, her eyes flicking towards me. "We have a situation, a priority meeting, now." My blood turned to ice. This was it. I was caught. But Marcus just nodded. He looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze, disappointment, regret. "I'm afraid I have to cut our evening short, Emma. Duty calls." It wasn't an accusation. It was a dismissal. But as I was escorted back to the main ballroom, I knew I had been compromised. My cover was blown. My training kicked in. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I made my way to a secluded alcove and, using a hidden communicator in my evening bag, sent the prearranged distress signal to the agency compromised, extraction needed, evidence secured. Minutes later, I was subtly intercepted by a man who appeared to be a waiter. "Ma'am," he whispered, "there's a problem with your vehicle. The valet needs you to come to the front." It was the extraction team. They led me out a side entrance, but as we moved through the service corridors, all hell broke loose. Shouts echoed through the building, followed by the sound of shattering glass. The agency had decided not to wait. They were launching a full-scale raid. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared. Men in black tactical gear swarmed the building. I was caught in the middle, a woman in a ball gown in the center of a firefight. One of Marcus's guards spotted me, his eyes widening in recognition. He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, he was taken down by one of my own team members. An agent grabbed me, shielding my body with his own as he yelled into his radio. "Asset secured, I have the package." The package, that's what I was, a fragile container for the information I carried. They hustled me out to an unmarked van. As we sped away, tires screeching, I looked back at the glittering tower. Marcus was being led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury. His eyes found mine for a fleeting second across the distance. A look of pure, unadulterated betrayal. The mission was over. The journey back to the agency safe house was a silent, jarring ride. The adrenaline from the raid slowly drained away, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I felt hollowed out, back in the sterile, white room, a different room, but identical to the one where my journey began. I finally allowed myself to look in a mirror. The reflection was a wreck. My elaborate hairdo had partially collapsed, strands falling around my face. My makeup was smudged, with a faint track of mascara down one cheek from when my eyes had watered in the chaos. The beautiful black dress was wrinkled and had a small tear near the hem. But underneath the dishevelment, the face was undeniably Emma's, and the strangest feeling washed over me. It wasn't the horror or dissociation I had felt when I first saw this face. It wasn't the critical eye of an agent evaluating their disguise. It was a wave of quiet, undeniable relief. It was relief that she was safe, that I was safe. The mission was a success. Marcus Reeves and his entire Helix network had been dismantled. The data on the microdrive was the final nail in their coffin. I had done my duty. Evan Ward had completed his mission. But as I stood there staring at my reflection, a terrifying question echoed in the silent room. Was Evan Ward still here? Did he even exist anymore? The body was Emma's, the voice was Emma's, and the feelings, the memories of the last few months, they were all Emma's too. The thought of going back, of reversing the process, of peeling away the layers of Emma to find the man underneath, no longer felt like a return to myself. It felt like an annihilation. It felt like dying. The door opened, and Claire stepped inside. She didn't say a word. She just crossed the room in 3 quick strides and wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a fierce, tight hug. All the walls I had built, all the composure I had maintained for weeks, crumbled in that instant. I buried my face in her shoulder, my body shaking with silent, racking sobs. I wasn't crying from fear or from the trauma of the raid. I was crying for the man I had lost and for the woman I was terrified of becoming. I was crying because, for the first time, I felt utterly and completely lost. Claire just held me, her hand stroking my hair, murmuring soft, comforting sounds until the storm of tears passed. When I finally pulled back, my face blotchy and my breathing ragged, she gently wiped a tear from my cheek with her thumb. "It's over," she said softly. "You did it." "The mission is over," I corrected, my voice thick with emotion. "But what about me? What happens to me now? They can reverse this, can't they? The hormones, everything." "Yes," she said, her gaze steady and serious. "The process can be reversed. For the most part, it would take time. More therapy, more surgeries." She let the words hang in the air. The thought of more hospitals, more drugs, more pain, made me feel sick. But it was more than that. The idea of losing this body, this face, this existence that I had fought so hard to inhabit, it was unbearable. I looked at her, my heart pounding with a new, different kind of fear, the fear of making a choice. "Claire," I said, my voice dropping to a desperate whisper, "I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to being Evan." The confession, spoken aloud for the first time, was both terrifying and liberating. I'm scared, and I don't understand it, but I don't want to lose the person I've become. I think I'm more myself as her than I ever was as him. A beautiful, gentle smile spread across Claire's face, a look of pure, unadulterated relief. She reached out and took both of my hands in hers, her grip warm and strong. She looked at the woman in front of her, not the agent, not the disguise, but me. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but sure, a promise of a new beginning. "Then we won't go back. We'll go forward." She squeezed my hands. "We will start over, with the name Emma Taylor." We stood there for a long moment, our hands clasped together, the fluorescent lights of the debriefing room shining down on us, in that sterile white space, a place designed for endings and classified reports. A new life was quietly beginning. The mission to take down Helix had been a dangerous journey into a world of lies and deception. But for me, it had been something more. It had been a journey inward, a painful and beautiful transformation that had allowed me to shed a skin I never knew was ill-fitting. From the ashes of a secret agent named Evan, a woman named Emma had found her true identity, a future she never expected, and in the calm, steady eyes of the woman holding her hands, a person who had seen her and accepted her from the very start. Hand in hand, we walked out of that room, leaving the ghosts of the past behind, and stepped out into the bright, uncertain light of the first day of the rest of my life.